guys, it's kind of a serious video now. This is by my Boris Johnson kind of hair dude, but he stole it from me though. Seriously though, I have this topic that I was by the whole response of different nations, different responses to the virus. I noticed, well, my country, the Netherlands, we apparently, well, we're not on lockdown, unlike most, it seems, at least a whole bunch of countries in Europe. France, Italy, obviously, okay, there it's very understandable, except that they don't address the cause, but fuck it, I can't say anything about it anymore, because this is not a conspiracy theory video. I'm not going for that anymore. I'm tired of it. Tired of being in that position. Plenty of other people now branding out the truth. People don't listen to me in that respect anyway. So fucking, I don't know if that's entirely true, but I've said enough. Anyway, fuck me. I was on some kind of topic. So yeah, I was saying Italy, okay, maybe lockdown's kind of understandable there, but it's very, like, Germany and the Netherlands, both, neither of them are on lockdown, and the reasoning for this is there's multiple reasons that the government gives, but like one very sensible one is that if you are on lockdown, you don't build any immunity at all, and once you get out of lockdown, you're just back at, you know, nothing is solved. The thing is going to spread anyway. So the idea here is people are self-isolating as much as they need to and, you know, can reasonably, which people, you know, do. The streets are very empty normally in the cities, whereas in nature there's more people in nature now, because people are obviously trying to be good for their own health, treat themselves well now. So it's very dumb for people to I mean, it seems dangerous to have a whole nation on lockdown and everybody has to stay inside, and it's not healthy, is it? I mean, I don't know, it doesn't seem healthy. It doesn't seem like that bolsters people's immune systems at all. Anyway, but there's other reasons, obviously, for not going on lockdown, which is that it's kind of difficult to understand how that would just work in the long run. But well, there was this other thing, like on in Friday, I think it was last Friday, on 5:30 in the afternoon, the government gave a press conference, and they said at 6 p.m. every restaurant would have to be closed, and also the coffee shops, the weed sellers. Well, that was kind of a small, like a short window people were given to get their last, you know, drugs. So there were lines of like the guy I was just talking to, he had a line of 150 people at 6 o'clock, and the cops came and they said, well, you're supposed to be closed at 6. And then the guy said, well, okay, but fine, but you, as long as you send these people home. And the cop said, okay, well, you know, I'm just be quick. I'll report you close at 6, which I really appreciate. And then, but better even was that 2 days later, or 1 day later even, the government decided to not to allow the coffee shops in restaurants to be open for takeout. No sitting in places allowed, but you were allowed to take buy either coffee or some snacks or some weed from windows, or just, you know, as long as you don't stay. Well, and stuff like this. What is interesting though is that how important the weed trade in this country is to the, you know, social order, apparently, because government made a decision, and it's not necessarily very often that they come back on decisions, especially not after one day. But I found that a very good sign of the flexibility of our government, just as I find it a good sign that we're not on lockdown at this point. I mean, knock on wood, but it's not this automatic panic response. And it's kind of there's a dialogue with the citizenry. So suddenly I'm feeling my country ain't the world's worst country in the world. It's probably one of the best in the West. I mean, I already decided that years ago when I came back from another drive through the whole continent of Europe. It ain't so bad here at all, after all. Anyway, I was my theory that I was gonna divulge. What the hell am I doing here? Why am I even taking this exit? It makes no sense. Theory I was divulging, which is that, well, crime. It was about crime. It was about, like, how does that work? Because crime is like the Jungian shadow, in a sense, right? It's the repressed part of society that it doesn't want to acknowledge, but that it does, inadvertently, have as a part of it. Well, that could be a comparison that's valid. And but the Jungian theory is, of course, that you have to, like, what the hell? Integrate, right? Integrate the shadow. But that's actually what the Dutch government has been doing in terms of this crime shadow. I'm talking about, like, the collective shadow. Is het gedoogbeleid, the permitting, like, the sales of weeds, and permitting thus supply to the sellers of weed, whereas it's actually formally illegal. It is still tolerated, it's still allowed systematically. And there's, in general, a more of a situation where the criminal elements of society are closer to the non-criminal elements of society. In a sense, I was tracing this back to the fact that we are, as a nation, a pirate nation officially. I mean, we started out pretty much as a world power due to the piracy, or we weren't, like, having we didn't have as much pretenses as other the colonial powers that came after us. We're just going to places and taking stuff that we were able to take or something. Anyway, but our country never really covered this up. It wasn't ever we didn't ever convince ourselves that we were there, like, taking resources from Indonesia because it was good for these Indonesians. I'm sure there were people who thought this, but mostly no. Mostly we're perfectly well aware of the situation. And in general, our whole public discourse when it comes to crime, it's always as if these criminals are considered mostly as part of society, that just, problematic part, but still a part. It's not like they're thrown into these humongous prisons and never heard of again. There was some kind of weird dialogue still open, except in very severe cases. And the same, like, we have, for example, to this theory as an example would speak the famous, very famous lawyer Bram Moskovich, who was always representing the most famous criminals, like cuddle criminals or something, criminals that sort of enjoy a measure of fame in the country, even though it's known that they have committed quite heinous crimes. But they're like characters in the play of the country's history or something, you know. A little bit like the Wild West. It's always a little bit here, like I suppose. But so my whole theorem here holds that there's a part of the shadow. There's a communication between the shadow and the light, like the good, whatever you want to call it, the lawful and the shadow. There's an open dialogue between them, like a window that's sort of shadowy. But this would be the theory. This open window from light to shadow keeps well, the shadow from festering, right? It keeps the grip between, and it also keeps the bright part alert. Theoretically, that would be the case. It would mean that our country is somewhat alert. Would have to mean, and I'm not sure. I wasn't, like, for the longest time, I was not at all thinking in those lines. I was thinking our country is one of the most gullible countries on the planet. But I'm now starting to think maybe that gullibility too is kind of a well, it is. I was always seeing they're gullible in terms of allowing all kinds of very shady stuff, and you know, talking over it, pretending it's not really all that shady. But that is precisely, obviously, this whole recognition of the shadow side, or it fits to that. And now with this crisis that the USA is on lockdown, and France is on lockdown, and Spain is on lockdown, obviously Italy is on lockdown, and a whole bunch of fucking countries are all on lockdown, and we are not. I'm just allowed to drive here at this point. Probably shouldn't post this video, because then probably I'll jinx it. But I'll make the video anyhow. So, yeah. So we'll see if there truly is kind of a vitality and a alertness to this country, as opposed to like in contrast with other countries. We will see.